Hi, and welcome to Consumers Decrypted. This is a webinar about what you need to know about the crypto consumer and how marketers can engage them. So my name is Eric Winner-Paisley. I'm an Insights Content Manager at Global Web Index, and I'm joined by Chase.
Hi, I'm Chase Buckle. I'm the Senior Trends Analyst at Global Web Index.
All right. So just for the beginning, let's start by talking a little bit about the context for this webinar. So it's been now 10 years since Bitcoin was launched, which, as we know, was the first cryptocurrency. So since then, this is an ecosystem that's grown massively, and it's had an equally massive press coverage. So I wanted to show you this timeline here. If we just flick through it really quickly, we're going to see you're going to see a movement here. So in the beginning, we have some really big milestones. There's things like the white paper being published, the very first transaction that comes actually almost a year after. And then we have a series of ups and downs that are actually reflected pretty closely in the stock prices. We have events like back in 2010, the very first hack happening where Bitcoin, like millions of Bitcoin, are stolen. We're also seeing some of the first commercial exchanges where, for instance, 10,000 Bitcoin change hands for 2 pizzas. We're also seeing a diversification of the landscape. There's altcoins, rival coins that are using the similar technology that are emerging, and the first viral videos. All in all, this growth in an infrastructure and in press coverage starts to lead to some of the price hikes that we actually see around 2013 and 14. They look like little squibbles on that plot, but I can tell you, as somebody who was there at the time, it felt like really big, like a very big deal. So I remember it from back then, how we're seeing like ATMs opening, the first initial coin offerings. So this was really a sense where it's in the press, and this sense of optimism was somewhat more like tempered as we start to see some of the bigger cryptocurrency exchanges fail. So all in all, this is a story of booms and busts and of Bitcoin being more and more ingrained into finance, but maybe not really quite yet having that sort of mass consumer breakthrough. So for the past couple of months, the price of Bitcoin has actually been hovering around the $6,500 mark. I think it's 5,000 today. But just last week, Bitcoin's plummeted by 12% over a one-day period, hitting a value of just more than 5,000. So the total market capitalization for Bitcoin now stands at $96 billion.
Well, that's the first time that the market cap has fallen below $100 billion since October last year.
Yeah, Bitcoin isn't the only casualty of this. Cryptocurrency price charts are all firmly in the red right now. So volatility is something that's back now. But as often the case, it's not entirely clear why this is. So one theory is that the crash is being at least partly caused by disagreements over a hard fork in Bitcoin Cash, which is a major software upgrade to the cryptocurrency that essentially creates a new cryptocurrency and leaves the old one intact, so a fork in the road. And that kind of uncertainty and the press coverage that the uncertainty has triggered has actually left a lot of lingering uncertainties around cryptocurrency as such.
So bringing us back to the consumer's perspective, as we do in GWI, despite the constant press coverage and the understanding of what cryptocurrency is actually a bit more, there's less clarity around that, and especially around the applications of it, or what they are in the real world. So these are still pretty unclear for the majority of us, for especially the consumer as well. So I imagine if you asked around 100 people, well, how many people would actually give you an accurate definition of what Bitcoin is, for example?
So, I mean, by now most people would have heard of it, but I would have guessed there'd be probably 1 in 10. It's really quite a murky field, and it's been hard to get solid statistics because the community of cryptocurrency holders has been so dispersed, and a lot of the users have been quite privacy conscious over the years. So there's really a gap between the coverage and what we know. And this has actually been helped by, there's been a lot of great individual studies, but there's a lot of difficulty in getting a global overview and also an overview that looks at more than just their finances.
So in this webinar, we're going to be bringing to light who cryptocurrencies are, cryptocurrency users are, what defines them as users, and also what sets them apart from the average internet user. We'll also be delving into how brands can target these users as well. So even if your business isn't going to target them directly, there are still a lot of learnings we can take from this market. So we'd like to add some perspectives on that.
All right, so just to explain to you how we actually know this. So Global Web Index research into the global digital consumer covers the majority of the world's online population, and we do so at a great level of granularity. As you'll see in the charts, we collect data from over 444,000 respondents a year, and we do that on a rolling basis across 45 markets.
Well, that research is representative of around 2.6 billion internet users, and, well, for every one of those 440 or more thousand respondents, we're able to cross-analyze more than 25,000 different data points. So we're building an unparalleled understanding of the modern digital consumer. We want to better understand their digital lives, so from their demographics, their attitudes and interests, to their online activities, social media usage, media consumption, their brand engagement, among many other traits.
So I think that this, by now, is going to be one of the largest global studies of cryptocurrency consumers ever. And apart from this, we've actually also got a lot of bespoke custom research studies that we do in addition to the ongoing research. And these are studies we do to dive deeper into different trends and topical areas. So just a few months ago, we polled 3,000 internet users in the UK and US as a follow-up. And we'll also be sharing some results from them too about cryptocurrency. All right, so let's get started.
So we're first going to give you an overview of the typical cryptocurrency owner, and then we're going to explore what defines them as an audience. We'll also be exploring how brands can best target them by diving into their media consumption habits, their social media engagement, and their marketing preferences.
All right, so let's get into the big stat that everyone, I think, is looking for. How many people in this world actually hold cryptocurrency? And our best estimate is that it's 5.5%. And that's 5.5% of the global internet population.
We've seen, from our global perspective, we've seen some countries that stand out as outliers. So, for example, what's going on in the Philippines here?
Yeah, if you look at the chart, that's definitely one of the most marked examples. It shows how cryptocurrency adoption is very unevenly spread throughout the world, geographically and demographically. The Philippines is a country that's had a very friendly regulatory environment. For instance, FinTech Singapore, which is a regional trade press, they actually estimated that blockchain businesses accounted for 16% of the FinTech ecosystem there. Also, internet penetration is relatively low in that market, and that means that internet users there will tend to be younger and skew more highly socioeconomically. And we also know that that's associated with more adoption of cryptocurrency.
Well, the Philippines is obviously a big market for remittances as well.
Definitely. It's about 10.5% of GDP, according to the World Bank.
Well, I've had a chance to look at some of the markets with lower cryptocurrency adoption. So these tend to be more mature markets. So, for example, France, Russia, Hong Kong, and Italy, just to name a handful. And owners here tend to be older, and they're more likely to be male as well, with as much as 75% being male in some of these markets.
Yeah, that's also why we can't expect cryptocurrency holders to be the same across the world. And it's really also where the strength of having a global attitudinal perspective as well.
So let's delve into what sets them apart. So to begin with, let's take a perspective on gender.
Yeah, so early research painted a picture of cryptocurrency holders as essentially a male-only club. It was a mixture of techies, activists, and investors. So, and I have to say that our research does confirm that partially, but we also add a lot of nuance to it.
So 5 years on from the first community surveys that were published, we're seeing a different picture of the typical cryptocurrency consumer. So the gender split now is more 70-30 than 80-20 in a lot of countries, and it goes down to around 67% globally. If we look at people whose only assets are cryptocurrencies, the gender ratio jumps to around 70% male.
So what about age? You'd expect investors generally to be a bit older than the general population, wouldn't you?
Well, they're actually considerably younger than the general online population, particularly compared to other investors. So nearly 40% fall into the 25 to 34 age range, which is very high, for example. Normally for other investors, that share will be around 30%, and that varies by market though.
Yeah, so if we go back to the extreme example, the Philippines, we know that they have a very young internet population. There's a well-known finding in psychology that younger people, especially younger men, are more open to risk, and that's a big theme for cryptocurrency holders.
Well, you'd expect to see a bias towards tech and finance with movements like this.
So yeah, that's definitely present. What I think is more interesting, though, is that they're so likely to be decision makers. A much larger share than the general internet population are in trusted positions, or they need to make judgment calls, and they also need to exercise a degree of confidence in their decisions.
Well, this all in all matches up with a higher socio-economic profile. We've got more high net worth individuals and high income earners here. And they've also typically attained a high level of education as well, with more than 40% having achieved either an undergraduate or postgraduate degree. Those figures are higher in the US and the UK.
Yeah. So let's for a moment shift over to looking at them from the point of view of them as investors. So I should say roughly a quarter of crypto consumers have no other investments outside their pensions or cash savings. And the remainder of them, they combine cryptocurrency with stocks and bonds, precious metal, and other assets. And let me just tell you a little bit about this asset grid that I made. So first of all, just look at the details here. So for cryptocurrency, we see that 4% of the population globally will have invested in arts and antiques. Cryptocurrency holders are almost 4 times more likely to have done that. They're also 2.6 times more likely to have invested in bonds, and they're 2.3% more or 2.3 times more likely to invest in gold. So we just look at the whole picture. That brings out all the connections between the different asset types that we track. Some of the standout ones for cryptocurrency is, of course, stocks and bonds. Stocks, which 39% of them hold. We've also got a very high ratio of cryptocurrency ownership among people who own annuities, bonds, and stocks.
Cool. So, for one, cryptocurrencies have an unusual mix of investments, like you just said. But looking beyond their financial portfolios, it's key to recall that demographics can only set the stage. So what is really interesting here, is how this group are distinct from the average internet user.
So cryptocurrency community has always had this undercurrent of pessimism toward the world of finance and government. I mean, after all, the first batch of cryptocurrency transactions ever made were stamped with a reference to the global financial crisis. 10 years on, that's actually no longer the case for the majority of cryptocurrency holders, even if it ever was. They're more positive about the world economy than the average user and the average investor.
That's right, and a currency that seems to offer a safe haven out of the hands of unpopular or distrusted institutions had a strong appeal for people with pessimistic or even contrarian views of the economy. So almost 60% of cryptocurrencies holders now say that they feel optimistic about the world economy, compared to around 44% of non-holders or investors. And more than half of those who have some sort of investment beyond their pension or cash savings, but don't use crypto. It's interesting to consider how this affects their attitudes and behaviors towards their own finances.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if they don't hold cryptocurrency, economic optimists have a confidence in the economy that is matched up by an optimism about their own finances and their ability to manage them. We are seeing it as generally associated with being more willing to borrow money and to gamble, being proactive about investment, and feeling more affluent than others. These are traits that are 40 to 50% more prevalent among optimists than the average internet user, and they are also 15 to 20% more prevalent among cryptocurrency holders than optimists who don't own any crypto. So this is an outspoken kind of economic optimism among cryptocurrency holders, and it's a powerful differentiator. It also explains why some people are attracted to these kinds of high risk investments.
Well, this is a group who obviously see themselves as adventurous. They might like to make decisions quickly based on their gut reaction. And they're also willing to buy products for the experience of being part of the community that's built around that product or service. So our bespoke research in September in the US and the UK on cryptocurrency owners shines more light on the subject. So because this group of investors are eager to move up in life, they're willing to invest in an outwardly speculative endeavor, while emphasizing the safety and predictability of their most characteristic investment as well. So long-term investment is by far the most widespread motivation to hold cryptocurrencies among our US and UK respondents.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note also that there's no one reason that people invest in cryptocurrencies. We see actually a lot of more hobbyist and ideological investors than actual day-to-day users. So, I mean, usage is low, but almost 70% expect the value of cryptocurrencies to increase next year. So, I mean, all in all, cryptocurrencies seem to be holding out for the future.
Well, so are all cryptocurrency holders like this, or is it where the ones that own a ton of crypto can convince themselves that the future is bright?
Right. Well, cryptocurrency owners, they list a number of benefits. There's not one common thread that reflects this. They have different assessments of why they're in it. As we discussed, some of them are in to support a cause, others because they're looking for some personal financial gain, others because they see it as the technology of the tomorrow. Especially for the last group, the people who see it as a tomorrow's tech, they want to be part of that. And for those people, really, all of these benefits that they derive or that they imagine merge.
So what does that mean for brands? How can they successfully target crypto owners and leave a lasting impression?
All right. What we've seen so far is an audience that can't really be described as mainstream. If we think about what many people would consider to be the advantages of cryptocurrencies, like anonymity, decentralized currency networks that are free of institutional control, then we start to paint a picture of what many would assume is a pretty elusive audience.
Well, if we recap and look at the demographic composition of this audience, like we looked at earlier, and also the attitudinal characteristics of this audience, like you can see in front of you, we're looking at a very young, male, wealthy, and tech-savvy group of people. Now, this set of demographic and attitudinal traits is a close match, for example, of another community traditionally thought of as fairly elusive and hard to reach for brands and marketers. And that community is esports fans, who actually turn out to be a very brand-engaged audience, especially if you're using the right channels and the right kinds of messaging.
Yeah, that's exactly the same that we see for crypto owners. I think maybe there's a little bit of a stereotype about people sitting behind their computers, feeling very secretive and anonymous. But really what you need to know about them is that they respond well to activations, and they respond also well to channels that are aligned with their mindset. And by mindset, we mean that brands and marketers really need to take some kind of fresh perspective on it when they target this audience. It's not only in terms of what channels and messaging should be at the heart of the campaign, but also how those channels align with the messaging. So let's start with that messaging part of it. So as we've seen earlier, we have here what is a fairly risk-taking and opportunistic group of people. As we saw in the media, it's been a volatile market. The market cap has gone up and down, and so compared to the global average, they're a lot more likely to say that they're risk takers, or that others see them as adventurous, with more than 60% saying it. As such, like traditional financial messages around safety, discretion, and security, they're important, but really they're unlikely to resonate as strongly. If marketers want to activate this audience, whether for blockchain-based products or for competitors, they're likely to do better if they appeal to this kind of sense of daring and optimism.
Well, if we also think back to the timeline of Bitcoin's development at the start of the webinar, then we know that, at least on a global sense, cryptocurrencies have some sort of a relatively humble beginning. So through the ups and downs of the crypto market, there have been some dedicated stakeholders. Even if the spike of late 2017 brought with it an influx of fresh investors, that kind of history has created a sense of community among crypto owners.
So these strong over-indexes for value in communities, they actually also hold true when we compare to the more traditional investors with stocks, shares, precious metals, and bonds. Our cryptocurrency owners are almost 50% more likely than the average to say that they would buy into something simply for the experience of being part of the community built around it. And it doesn't actually matter what region we look at here. This audience is always way ahead of the average for craving this kind of strong sense of community.
Well, that sense of community resonates throughout the channels they use online too. Before we start delving into those channels, I just wanted to round off this attitudinal section by picking out something commonly associated with cryptocurrency holders, and that is privacy. So, like Eric mentioned just now, there's a common stereotype about these people sitting behind their computers and having a very privacy-conscious view, and well, that is true to some extent, but with largely anonymized cryptocurrency wallets protecting the owner's identity to a much greater extent than a traditional fiat currency like the dollar or the pound, for example. And not to mention with the lingering associations of cryptocurrencies with illegal activities, as I just said, these cryptocurrency owners have often been thought of as very privacy conscious.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, they are to a large extent conscious of their privacy. More than 2/3 of them say they worry about how their personal data is being used by companies, and just over 60% say they're concerned about the internet eroding their personal privacy, just in a general sense.
Well, that's true, but no more so than the average internet user, and that's really interesting. It's interesting because not only does it throw shade on a very conventional stereotype on the crypto consumer that we've been mentioning, but it's also very representative of how the crypto user base has likely expanded and evolved over time. So essentially, as more cryptocurrencies have entered the mix with USPs which have focused more so on utility or industry disruption rather than anonymized value exchange, this may have diluted the core user base with the traditionally strong privacy concerns.
I mean, that being said, there is a slightly significant over-index for people who say they prefer to be anonymous when using the internet, and we should expect that. There's also a slightly higher ratio of them who use things like VPNs and so on. Right. So let's just take stock of the channels that cryptocurrency owners make use of online.
So there's no denying that crypto owners are making use of a variety of channels, like you say, both traditional and modern. But to start, they're spending a lot longer online in general. So for example, they're spending more than 30 minutes more per day online on their mobiles and just under an hour longer per day on their PCs, laptops and tablets.
So, I mean, they're also very keen gamers. They average almost 80% more time daily on game consoles than the average audience. And we saw that earlier as well, where gaming was one of the indexes that they particularly over-indexed for. So, in fact, cryptocurrency holders are devoting significantly longer periods of their day on all the channels we track. Alright, so really they're averaging around 50% longer on online TV, streaming music, and engaging with the online press. They're also spending around 60% more time in their day reading print press, interestingly. So it's both a very digitally engaged and a very well-read audience, indeed.
Well, but it's social media which takes up the largest share of their online time per day. They're spending an average of 3 hours on it daily. And that's effectively almost 40% of their daily time spent online, which is devoted to social media. So it's worth looking at which social platforms they're choosing to spend their time on.
So we're going to exclude China from the analysis here. China largely maintains its own ecosystem of social platforms, and that's of course thanks to official restrictions and also their unique digital landscape. But we should note that it's mainly WeChat that dominates this market. So outside of China, it's YouTube and Facebook which top the list for monthly visitation. That's quite similar to what we'll see more broadly among internet users. So these aren't people who are hiding behind only in secret forums and dark social. It's also very similar to the online population that they use Instagram, Facebook Messenger, and WhatsApp, which are all among their top 5 visited platforms. But as we mentioned earlier, there is a big community focus among crypto owners. We can trace that. We see how their choice of social media profiles reflects it. So a lot of networks have emerged as really quite ideal platforms that bind communities together and support discussion around cryptocurrencies. So prime examples are Twitter and also particularly Reddit.
Well, while cryptocurrency owners are part of a global and relatively tight-knit community, they're actually also divided up into many sub-communities too, and that's really reflected in these social media platforms. So at the time of this webinar, there's more than 2,000 cryptocurrency coins or tokens in circulation in the market at this time. And many of these sub-communities are formed around each one of these coins or tokens. So A cursory browse of Reddit, for example, will shine light on these communities, all circulating ideas and news surrounding their favourite cryptocurrencies. Now, cryptocurrencies are actually over twice as likely as the average internet user to be using Reddit online each month, for example. And there's strong evidence to show how their business or finance interests seep into their social media engagement too. So when we look at the types of people or organizations cryptocurrency owners follow on social media, they're almost twice as likely to be following entrepreneurs or business people, with almost 40% saying they do.
I mean, so for a lot of the businesses behind individual cryptocurrency coins, social media have emerged as an important touchstone for them when they are interacting and informing their asset holders. Almost a fifth of crypto owners have interacted with a brand on a messaging app or asked a question to a brand on a social network, for instance. So that's actually twice as likely as the average to be doing that.
But also, there's a lot of information to be digested surrounding cryptocurrencies, and vloggers have proved an important means of spreading information in these communities. We can see that in their social media engagement too. They're over 60% more likely to say that they follow vloggers on social media.
Yeah, it's actually, on that, it really actually quite was a keystone in the history of Bitcoin when one of their videos explaining what it was about went viral, and that was 6 years ago. So the real question is, how does this translate into their marketing touchpoints? Well, if we just look at how they discover brands, again, we see the importance of social networks. Search engines, TV ads, and online ads compose their top 3 channels. But they're much more likely than the average to be finding new products or brands via recommendations on social media or on updates on brand social media pages. And they're also around 90% more likely to be discovering brands using vlogs too.
Well, nevertheless, it's still important to note that traditional channels still play a crucial role. Almost 40% discover brands via TV ads, like we just mentioned, and that gives this channel one of the most impressive reach levels among all of them in our chart. But it's also around a third discovering products via word-of-mouth recommendations as well. And considering this is a very vocal group online, that really matters. Our data shows that more than 60% are posting reviews online each month, putting them way ahead of average for this. And almost 70% have said that they regularly inform friends and family on new products or services, so winning them over as a brand advocate can go a long way.
Yes, they clearly put a great deal of confidence in the reviews that they deem trustworthy. As I said, they're not afraid of voicing their own opinion either. They have this strong propensity to be discovering brands through well-known individuals or celebrities, and that also underlines the opportunity that there is for brands to align themselves with the right kind of influencers, as long as it's in an open and transparent relationship. I think anybody who's read a Reddit thread about crypto will see that you'll get called out if the community don't see you as authentic. And it's really important. Like, there's been cases of influencer fraud, and there's also the fact that crypto owners are a lot more likely to be blocking ads. And they'll block ads that they see as irrelevant, annoying, or intrusive. So brands can't afford to approach them in a way that doesn't prioritize authenticity and doesn't prioritize transparency.
But what about when it comes to how they want to get more information on brands or products?
So when they're researching these products, this is actually where social media comes into its own. Social networks sit just 5 percentage points behind search engines as an online research channel. And among 16 to 34s, who as we saw earlier are among the core demographics for this audience, this narrows down to just 2 percentage points. So if this trend continues on its current trajectory, as they are with most similar demographics, it shouldn't be long before social networks emerge as the top online research channel among this group. And again, we're seeing the importance of community and the importance of peer-to-peer recommendations among crypto owners. Consumer reviews stand as the third most important channel for research. Looking at the areas where they're most ahead of the average, that'll be video sites like vlogs, which are really quite prominent, and messaging services as well.
Well, so taking a slight step back, we can see some key themes for brands to act on in order to activate this audience. So their messaging needs to stimulate the crypto community's sense of daring and optimism and align with their interests. But as they are relatively a tight-knit community, brands need to pick and choose their channels selectively to avoid coming across as inauthentic or to avoid delivering that message in the wrong environment.
Absolutely. And social video is so key among this audience. It's really how they inform themselves and how they communicate with the wider community. And tapping into that will require brands to understand the nuances of how to engage with social media. A lot of them show a very purposeful approach to developing their understanding and to pursuing their interests, which in this case would be finance or business related typically.
So thanks very much for listening, everyone. If you have any questions about the topics we covered today or anything at all, feel free to get in touch with us. You can always find out more about Global Web Index from our website globalwebindex.com, which has details about our other products, like our custom research offerings and our GWIQ analytics solution for audience validation and advertising effectiveness studies, and our new data on engagement with specific named brands. Thanks everyone, and bye.